Dr. Wang is a supervisory clinical psychologist and director of mental health services at the Department of State. He's also the president of the Vietnamese Eucharistic Youth Movement in the U.S., branch of the Pope's Worldwide Prayer Network, and pontifical work under the Holy See. In a servant leader role, Dr. Huang is charged with the responsibility of collaborating with leaders across the country in planning and directing programs to assist 25,000 plus youth members at over 40 chapters in parishes to be good Christians and contributing members to society. Dr. Huang has recently been a featured speaker on multiple webinars, including those for the National Federation of Catholic Youth Ministry on accompaniment of families and young people during the pandemic. And it is my great honor and privilege to welcome and invite you to embrace our guest speaker, who has invited us all to call him Young. Thanks be to God, since I am killing his name, I'm sure. So Young, thank you for being with us, and thank you for sharing your gifts and talents with us, and welcome to the Diocese of Trenton, at least virtually.
Thank you, Dan, and thank you to our pastors out there and everyone here on the call today. It's truly moving to see so many of you gather here and invest your time into learning about ways in which we can accompany our youth. And if anything, I think it speaks volume to how much you care, how much you value our youth in this day and age. Not only they're the future of our church, but they are also our present. And the more that we come to understand the struggles that they go through, the more that we understand their shoes, their path, and I think the better it is that we're able to best accompany them. So with that, I'll start with this quote here. You know, not long ago, I think it was several weeks ago, was Good Shepherd Sunday, and I'm often reminded that by this very quote that I am the Good Shepherd and I know my sheep. And the only way that I think all of us in our work to be youth leaders, youth ministry leaders, and to evangelize and to help our youth to be good Christians, the only way I think that we can do so is we can communicate, we speak the language that our youth does, our young people does, and really understand the plight they go through as a young adult in this very difficult society, and even on prior to COVID. And one of the aspects in which I'm blessed to have the opportunity to be here to share with you is really from a mental health angle. There is a relationship between the body and the mind and the spirit. And when our body and our minds are well, that's significant hope in terms of us growing spiritually. And so as a clinical psychologist, I'm blessed to be the opportunity to be here. And I think it's also timely that May is not only a month for Mary, but it's also a month for Mental Health Awareness Month. And I think it's a timing for us to take some time to sort of understand what some of the challenges that our youth, our young adults go through, and how to best accompany them and how to help them. Initially Dan had asked me to put, a 1 hour talk, and I sat there, I scratched my head, so you want to do A, B, C, D, E, X, Y, Z all in 1 hour? And it just doesn't seem to me that's practical. And so I offered, well, how about this? Why don't we break it down to different sections, and also recognizing the attention span of most folks usually within the hour. We'll be lucky that we can absorb about 15 minutes or so of information. And so recognizing that, let's break down the talk so that we have ample time to digest it and to also raise questions, because I think we learn best by dissecting the information and asking questions. And I'll throw this out. I do not have all the answers, as Dan has mentioned early on. I think that all of us collectively as a community, I think we can also help and share our own knowledge and experience, and see this truly not as a lecture where it's unidirectional, but really I invite all of you to see this as an opportunity for us to sort of collaboratively work together. And I'll be more than happy to share some of the best practices that I've seen and in my role as a clinician and as a youth leader that in my work as a youth ministry leader over the years with our community. And so today I'll talk a little bit first about really the effect of the COVID-19 pandemic and what the challenges that our young people face. And its impact on their well-being. And I invite all of you as well to, think young, put yourself in the role of a teenager between 12 to 17, 18 years old. And I think that was the age group that Dan had alluded to. And, because life through their lens is completely different from how we see the world through our adult lens. And so I invite you to kind of walk in that shoe and put on their lens. And then the following week, we'll talk about ways in which we accompany our youth, our young adults, and ways to help our young adults cope with the challenges that they're currently facing. And so along the way, by means, I invite you to share your questions. And if the questions pertaining to a particular workshop later on, I'll defer it to that time and now only address a question that's relevant to the topic in the day. And then last but not least, we'll touch base on really, capitalizing on faith, on hope and on love, on really the good news that we currently have and how to apply that into their struggle day to day. So that's sort of the approach that we'll go today. But first, let's start a little bit in terms of sharing with you, the ministry that I've done, and I'll take a couple minutes here, and it's more of as an icebreaker. But as Dan mentioned, we're under the Pope Reward Prayer Network, and me as a young adult ministry, I'm blessed with the opportunity to serve as the president of the organization. We have over 140 chapters. When I say chapters, I mean parishes that has these youth ministry under the organization. Unfortunately, we don't have any in the New Jersey area. We have them in the New York and pretty much everywhere else around the country. And if you see them in sort of the scout uniform, that's us. And so we work with youth from, as young as 6, 7 years old, all the way up to 18. And then we'll cultivate young leaders as well. So several years ago, we had the opportunity to meet the Holy Father, because the Holy Father entrusted this ministry prior to this called the Apostleship of Prayer to the Jesuits. And so our Holy Father happened to be a Jesuit when he became Pope. So the first thing he did was he's convened all of us representative of the different youth ministry all around the world to meet him. So some of my folks from all around the country, they had an opportunity to meet him one-on-one. Here's another picture of another youth member having a one-on-one with the Holy Father. Here's some parents chaperoning other youth leaders, and even our chaplain, our priest of the organization. So I was there too, and I happened to also had the amazing and blessed opportunity to have a one-on-one with the Holy Father as well, and has this amazing picture to share with you. And so there, if you see that hand touching the Holy Father's hand, that is my hand, and that picture has been a prized possession of mine. But if we would zoom in a little bit, I know I joke around, but luckily I was there and they were able to grab this other angle where I just barely touch his hands. I haven't washed my hands since then. Jokingly aside, because of COVID, I had to wash my hands because I didn't want to spread germs to folks. Moving forward, just 2 years ago, the Holy Father once again invited all of our youth ministry leaders on the anniversary of 175th founding of this organization. So as president of the organization, I was extremely blessed to have the opportunity to meet with the Holy Father, tell him our ministry, to present our gift to him, this chaplain or this spiritual leader scarf on him, and had a good opportunity there. So I share that as a little icebreaker to really understand the youth. We have to really walk in their shoes, interact with the youth as much as possible. And only I think through doing so, we can best have a sense of the struggle that they go through. All right. Now, getting back to COVID. So as within about a year ago, and I'll have to throw this out first. I think it is already difficult as it is being a teenager. And I hope you all agree, minus COVID aside. In this day and age, 2021, being a teenager in itself is already stressful and difficult, with all sorts of challenges, pressure, societal pressure, family pressure, internal struggles. And it is no wonder that, according to the CDC, between 1 and 5 teenagers eventually would develop some form of depression or anxiety. So minus COVID aside, that already in itself is a struggle for our young adults. Now, COVID hits, and you could only imagine the struggle that they go through, right? And COVID not only impacts, all of us. I think all of us internationally around the world. It really crippled our economy, our way of life. It really changed everything. But specifically for our young adults, it really left a big dent on how they interact. So let's walk through some of those things together. So first, routine changes. Right? And so think of our teenagers. You would get up, you would go to school, right? And while you're at school, you're interacting with your friends, you're having a good time, you're socializing, you're building trust, you confide in one another, you have that support, you have someone to talk to while you're there, and really you're able to share this journey with one another between you and your friends. COVID hits and now you're homebound. You're not out at all. And even at the peak of COVID, so now you're isolated from your friends. And more so for our young people, out of sight, is out of mind. And so now they're not seeing people as much, even though we have the technology, we have the phone, we have the instant messenger and whatnot, it is not the same, right? There's a reason why when they, in psychology, we did a study with rhesus monkey, they react better when even if you just had a fake doll with some soft fur on them, where they have some tactile experience, versus just having someone just vocally speaking to the monkeys. So same thing with us as human beings. We excel. We do so much well when we're socially engaging with one another. Now, as a young teen, I'm sure there are other social events. They're going to birthday parties, they're going to the movies, they're going out to the mall. They have opportunity to exercise, play sports, and do things together. And now, with the limited social engagement, that puts them at a sort of a depressed state. And naturally, I think all of us, not just teenagers, even as adults, were destined or were designed to be a social being. We're destined or designed to have relationship with one another, whether it be familial relationship, friendship, marital relationship, boyfriend girlfriend relationship, what have you. All of us, in some capacity, were designed to have relationship and more of an intimate, spiritually intimate level, and even for all of our religious clergy, priests, and deacons and brothers, they have too that intimate relationship with Christ, right, continuously. And so now when all of those are stripped away, guess what? It's really hard for them to struggle with, right? Another angle to this too, when teenagers, keep in mind, as they're approaching 17, 18, they are really at the point where they are looking for independence, freedom, right? They've been looking for this, all this opportunity that, going to the prom and really having independency. Now, it's just within the home. And to many of them, they felt like they're at a loss of freedom. To some of them felt like they're, I hate to use the word, but when we interact with some of our young teenagers, they felt like they're in prison, like literally. Just can't imagine how that feels. And as we think about imprisonment, there's a reason why torturers or what is it, social confinement or isolation is a form of torture, right? Because you're no longer interacting with folks. So think of how that would impact you. Right? Another challenge that I'm seeing, and this is what I'm hearing from our young adults, is this break in continuity of learning. Right? For a good decade plus of their lives, schooling is getting out, getting on a bus or getting in a car or walk or bike or run to school, what have you, and then sitting in a physical classroom. And all of a sudden now, they've spent months with virtual learning, looking through a monitor, looking through a computer. For a lot of our adults, some think telework is great. We get to stay home, we can work in our pajamas, and we may look at the kids and say, what is wrong with you? You get to study from your bedroom, and why are you complaining, right? But really, again, as a social age, they thrive on interacting with one another. And for some, it may be difficult to adjust to learning online. Think about it. Many of our young people have been conditioned to learn in person, having live instruction. And now all the instruction that we get is through a monitor, and a lot of time is go watch this video, watch that video, and do the homework, etc. And even if the teacher's on live, it still feel as though they're getting instruction through a video monitor. So it's a lot of them difficult to adjust. And now, and research has also shown that now because they can get up later, knowing that school is literally just flipping the computer open, they are going to bed later and later, and getting up later and later. And with the extra time that they have, guess what they invest in doing? The only thing they can do best within their home, social media, right? Or gaming, or some, definitely not outside exercise that much, but texting was all a lot of the things that they've been reported to do. And now as you're on social media, guess what happened? Lots of distraction, right? You know, knock on wood that we have children who would check in, or we have the capability to monitor the screens, but then there are many, many temptations and opportunities for our young adults to go down the wrong path. Now, the thing too about the internet that many of us may not know is that there's an algorithm in Google and Facebook and TikTok and Instagram. The things that you click on, they will remember the cookie, the pattern, and they will continue to feed you that information. I don't know if any of you have this experience where if you're looking at something on Facebook or on Google and you click on wanting to buy a blender or something, all of a sudden you see all these ads of blenders showing up on your emails and on your chat. So that's because there's an algorithm linking you to something. So for our young adults, as they're engaging in whatever topic of interest, that may be politics, that may be, you know, the civil unrest, that may be all the social dilemma that's going on, and they engage into whether it be dialogue or arguments or verbal fights online. Guess what? The social media is going to continue to feed them these headliners, and the more that they're on it, the more that they're going to be exposed to it, and the more they'll be engaged into all these very disruptive online experience. So imagine that too, as a young adult now in 2021, going through all of that. Break in continuity of healthcare, right? And so pre-COVID, you're able to go and check in with your provider, your doctors, your nurses, and to get the annual routine care. And there are more attention being placed on you and your wellness. Now during COVID, because of fear of transmission or of contracting the virus, there's a reduced in access to healthcare screening. So now really many of us we lack the ability to detect what may be going wrong. And not only quote unquote normal children, but children with special needs that were unable to detect that due to COVID. And I think for some of our parents or some of our community members, they may not know or understand what really mental health is. And this is a very prime example. Just last week, I got a message from a parent who snapshot a journal entry of her daughter. And it turns out that her daughter, who's a teenager, now is experiencing obsessive compulsive personality disorder. She's counting things. She is feeling unsafe. And all the parent keep on telling her is, you know, you're normal, nothing is wrong, go pray more, and that will help, right? And then she ended up turning to cut herself. And in her journal, she said, why can't my mom understand? Don't you think I know it's not normal, but why are you keep on saying that it's normal? So I think, you know, I think praying is good, but I think more so accompanying our youth, help them to understand. Just as Jesus back in the day, Jesus didn't say to all of the folks out there, you know what, just go pray to my Father. Go pray, go pray, go pray. No, he put on his sandals. He, you know, journey out there with them. He sits with them. He preaches with them. He eats. He dines with them, and that's accompaniment. And so I think a lot of time, many of us without that awareness, we not understand, and what our young adults are telling the parents often is being negated as something that's that's not what it seems. Because no parent would want to hear, oh yeah, you have a mental health concern, or you have a mental health diagnosis. And with all the stigma that's going on, our young people struggle with that tremendously. And in normal circumstances, things like this, they would be able to go to their peers, go to their friends, and kind of have a shoulder to lean on. But now during COVID, guess what? Unable to do that, and sort of bottled in. And there's not a surprise that some of them may engage in self-harm thoughts or develop unhealthy coping mechanism. Right. All right. What else is going on? How is this impacting our youth now? Cancellations of major milestone events. Just think about this. As a young teenager, you look forward to that senior prom. You look forward to that junior prom. You look forward to that track meet, that sporting event where you could, showcase your God-given talent and all of the sacrifice and all of the work that you put in. And cancel and taken away. And for some of our young adults too, the graduation, that's sort of the epiphany of what they've been striving to work at. And that's been taken away and result to a virtual graduation where, there's a picture of themselves on the screen, and that's about the extent of it. Birthdays, and major celebration, all of those has been taken away. And you would imagine how that would impact a young adult emotionally, from an emotional standpoint. Linking to the parents. And this is at a time where, and you hear this all over the news, there's a sense of loss of security and safety that depending on the status of their parents may experience unemployment. Right? They may not be able to continue to bring home the bacon. And as we know now during the summer days, a lot of the food shelters are experiencing a significant shortage of food supplies for donation. So the parents encounter distress, and as young adults living in the home with the parents, those stress are transferred down as well as they see their parents going through with a lot of these stressors. Now, job then leads to financial stress, and those of you who have gone through it, those of you who, interesting, there was a stat that account to about approximately close to 70% of Americans who live paycheck by paycheck. That's a huge number. And imagine if one of your paychecks cut short, just the anxiety and the stress that comes with it. Back to COVID, fear of infection, fear, of you contracting the virus. The minute you hear someone cough, someone not wearing a mask, prior to this, before the vaccine's been out, and even now, and there's still some unknown. Wait, the CDC says you have the vaccine, you wear it, but then we've heard other news that someone who's been vaccinated and still dies, right? Uncertainty continue to come at our young adults, and many of them may not have been vaccinated because the vaccines aren't available to them. And when their family, their elders, parent and grandparents, when they're infected, and knock on wood, I hope you haven't experienced this, but I would imagine it's happening to some of us within my community for sure. We've had loss of family members due to COVID, and let's just say it's painful. It's definitely something that we don't want to put on any young adults, but nonetheless, it's a reality of life, and that's something that happened. So be able to recognize and now factor all of those together. How would that impact young adults? And just this last, area of challenge that I think often it's not linked to mental health, but which I think it's important for us to touch base on. It's really, their spiritual wellness or their faith. And even many of us as adults, we struggle with our faith. But now imagine someone who's a teenager, 13 years old, 14 years old, when they see all of this is going on, and I am quite certain that some, or if not a good number, will question, well, where is my God? Why is he allowing this to happen? If he loves me so much, why did my, dear loving grandfather have to die? If he is, it's so much the merciful God, why are we at 100,000 plus X number of deaths due to COVID? And so as our young adults, they struggle with this. Not again. They need to turn to the pastor, need to turn to other community members, but now because they're confined within their home, that puts a limit on the things that they do. And now we're starting to hear Zoom fatigue, virtual fatigue, online fatigue. Now they might not even want to do anything with online because they're so, virtually worked up as a result of it. And during the COVID pandemic, it is it's approved by the church for you to attend mass virtually. You do not need to get up. You do not need to go to church in person. And now, as we resume back, all of a sudden, well, you can go back to church now. And I think we need to have a better way to accompany and approach our young, because as I have heard from some of our young adults, well, it seems convenient to me when you needed me to be in church and you said you need to go to church, but now, with COVID, and you said, no, it's fine, you can stay home. It's still God. God still loves you. You still are interactive, and then you're still part of a community. And now after COVID, it's a mandate. You have to go back. If not, you're a sinner, right? And so maybe helping our youth, our young adults to understand that and find ways to accompany them and not just say, well, that's a sin. You need to go back. If not, you're a sinner. Now it's a mandate. Now it's a law, or a diocesan guideline. So that too, I think it's a struggle for our youth. And I think all of these are sort of linked in together. So I'll pause there real quick. These are some of the key area of challenges that within the mental health field that we see impacting our young adults in this day and age. And I didn't mention yet some of the current events. The George Floyd incident, the civil unrest, and that has shown there's a gap between the elder parents and the younger generation in terms of their political views and their views on some of the current events that's been happening. And then that too has clashed with one another. And then minus the whole cultural differences, right? Within your diocese. I'm sure that there's a diverse makeup of young adults, and different young adults, depending on their ethnic or cultural makeups, has their own struggle and challenges as well. So that's something also to be mindful of. And so I'll pause here, and I invite all of you, if there are other struggles or challenges that you see within our young adults, I invite you to share that in the chat box so that we too can learn from one another. These are just some things that I've shared early on that are key and major within through the lens of mental health. So love to hear from our attendees online. The social dilemma, exactly. Yes, I was. Someone made a comment there, Rose McVeigh. Yes, the social dilemma. If you haven't, go look at it. It sort of addresses what I spoke early on about social media. Yep, very good. Like real salt on the usual inherent hopefulness of youth. My students are obsessed with transgender. Yeah, that's not touching into the LGBTQ, and on cultures yet, and some of the challenges they go through, feeling accepted or not accepted. Very good. Others, I see the cost of therapy along with the unwillingness of some to attend. Yeah, certainly. I think the stigma of mental health is real. For some decade of years now, still today, we're still fighting it. We're still trying to promote, and even here in the federal government, we see it left and right, that people are so hesitant because of the stigma associated with it. And hopefully we could work together as a community. Unreported child abuse. Thank you for bringing that up. And to some, as sad as it may sound, we had some experience with some of our young adults that because of the toxic environment that they have at home between their adult parents and the fights and the domestic violence, that going to school was their escape. Going to church, going out into the community was their escape. And now with COVID, that they're home, and now they're sort of are sort of forced to just be home and be confronted with these toxic stressors that they deal with on a regular basis. Yeah, so thank you, FFF department, for bringing that up. They have to deal with adult issues, definitely, and then expectation from adults. More young people are showing up at local meetings of AA and NA. And I haven't touched base on alcohol yet, just because we're talking about teenagers, but not just teenagers, but adult as well. We often been socialized to turn to alcohol as this quick fix. It numbs the system. It makes you feel good. Actually, alcohol is a depressant. it makes you feel worse, essentially. And what I call alcohol, it's if not managed correctly, it becomes a brain disorder. What that means is even if you want to stop, you can't because you've been so addicted, the brain gets you wrapped up into it unless you go through detox and significant treatment. But yes, alcohol impacts many of us as well. Online shaming and bullying. Now that they're online as often, there's a lot of online bullying that happens, and I think the challenge, the being online, is sort of stripped away of their self-concept, right? Because everything you see on social media, on entertainment, on TV, they portray this very perfect appearance. If you look at most of the Disney movie, right, Frozen, this hourglass figure, this perfection as to how they present, and this is shown to young children. So same thing on media and social media. You have to present in a way, and many of our young adults seems as though they're hiding behind the alias. They're hiding behind this picture that they either Photoshop or graphic to represent themselves, but not necessarily how they truly feel. So thank you. TikTok during pandemic, negative habits, very good. Fewer opportunities to engage in service activities, right on. Unable to be able to go out to the community and interact with folks as much. Very good. Thank you all for sharing. So now, how does that impact our youth from a mental health standpoint? So, there was a recent study by the National Hall and Children Health at Michigan Medicine, and they surveyed about 1,000 parents, and these are parents of teenagers between the ages of 13 through 18, which is the age group of our young adults that we were looking at. And the results showed close to 50% of parents says that the teenagers could have either shown sign of a new or worsening mental health. New meaning signs of mental health they have not seen before, now that they are seeing. And worsening of mental health, it's if they already had a pre-existing mental health condition, now the signs are even worse, right? So clearly, right away, 50%, that's 1 out of 2, have shown some increase in mental health concern. 1 in 3 girls, as compared to 1 in 5 boys, have experienced new or worsening anxiety. So it impacts more girls than boys. So hopefully that will give you some sense as to if you're doing ministry with young adults, it does impact girls significantly more. And on the left there that you see, more girls experiencing anxiety, signs of depression, sleep issues is a major concern. As I alluded to earlier, going to bed later, getting up later, sort of their whole routine is sort of mixed. And withdrawn from family, right? Social isolation, because now they've been sort of conditioned by society as a reaction to COVID is to socially isolate, or social distancing. And then unable to cope with a lot of stresses that they do. Some of these get manifested as aggression. And really from a psychological sense, aggression is really a mask of depression. It's a mask of something that they're dealing with, a mass of anxiety, a mass of something that they're struggling with. Right. And so I'd like to, take a little bit of time here to talk a little bit about what does anxiety and depression look like, because we hear it all the time, right? And unless we're a trained medical provider, I would encourage, most of you or all of us to refrain from putting that label onto one of our youth member, unless we know for sure, or he's depressed, or he seems like he has depression, or she may have anxiety. I think a way of reframing or looking at it, maybe he or she is showing signs that may be indicative of depression or of anxiety, versus sort of kind of bluntly labeling someone as such. So let's take a minute and kind of go through what some of these signs are, and I'll just focus on the 2 major ones that we often hear as anxiety or depression. And for the most part, I'm sure many of you sort of know these signs and symptoms, and I'll distinguish what makes it a disorder versus not. And so usually when someone who's going through sort of a a bout of generalized anxiety, episode, where they feel, all of a sudden unexplained anxiety, whereas these anxiety comes from. And if they're able to specifically pinpoint to a particular stressor, so that's often what we term as a fear, a phobia, like fear of water, fear of height, fear of being out in the public space. But if it's just general anxiety, all of a sudden I just feel so overwhelmed, I feel so stressed out, and I worry constantly. So that would be a symptom to look for. Increase in muscle soreness or aches, where you feel your body is aching, certain areas of the body, your back, your leg, your glutes, just feeling achiness that weren't there before. All of a sudden, you're feeling it now. And as all these anxiety and this muscle soreness built up, you have a hard time sleeping. All of a sudden, you will notice that you're sleeping less. You're going to bed later. You get disrupted sleep. You have very unrestful sleep and getting up in the middle of the night, and your mind is just sort of just wandering over and over. And as such, it impacts your ability to concentrate. You feel that you can't concentrate that much. If our young adults report, it seems to have difficulty concentrating virtual school or at home, or if the parents are reporting that they have a hard time concentrating on whatever task that they need to do, and unable to follow through, that's an indication. And as all of this really mounts up, they get irritable, they get frustrated easily. And I've been hearing a lot of our young adults report by their parents that they just snap easily, versus before, that's not the case. But now all of a sudden they just seem to have a hard time containing or dealing with those emotions. Dysregulation of emotion is common, feeling fatigue, feeling stressed out, feeling restless. You just don't want to do anything. And it's a very unpleasant feeling to go through. So know that a good portion of our young adults during this particular time, with everything that I've shared early on about the challenges and its impact, they're going through with this. Now, talking about depression slightly. So, just as the word itself sort of describes when someone's feeling depressed, I think for the most part, many of you can see and distinguish what that behavior it's like. If a teen, it's just feeling, really down, and you can tell it from how they present themselves physically. You can tell from their verbal communication. You can tell from their nonverbal communication. They just seem down and unmotivated. They feel like they don't want to interact with anybody. Just want to socially withdraw, lock themselves in their room, not speaking with folks, not interacting with folks, which they used to be. They will have decrease in appetite, not wanting to eat, or will end up just eating much more, gaining weight versus losing weight. And in doing so, there's a sense of just, there's no positive outlook in life. There's a short future, and really the things that they enjoy doing in the past, whether it be volleyball and exercising, playing with things, they're no longer doing that. They just want to lay in the bed and then just sleep, and just really unmotivated. And you would often see tearful spells as their struggle they're going through with this difficulty. Right? And to some, if it rises to the level where they may even talk about sort of suggesting these passive suicidal thoughts, things such as I don't know when this will end. Maybe it's never going to end. Or sometime with all this is going on, I wish I can just go to sleep and never wake up. I wish there's a magic pill somewhere that I can just take and make all of this go away. So all of these are sort of indicative of having depressive symptoms. Right? So I'll pause there a little bit and in highlighting some of the ways in which the coronavirus impacts all of us, and more particularly impacts our youth, and what does that really look like? On a Thursday night, we're all getting together and we're talking about depression and anxiety. Obviously, it's not at all that pleasant, but I think being able to understand our youth, being able to know what they go through, it will help us significantly when we say to our young adults, you know what? Hearing you talk about how difficult it is here at home, while I can't walk in your shoe completely, but I can only imagine how difficult that must feel. And be able to convey that, you know, being stripped away of your milestones that you anticipate and look forward to so much, but you're no longer able to. I can only imagine how difficult that must feel. So I think that alone in itself, being able to recognize and understand what you go through and convey that to our young adults, you're already bridging, you're already building relationship, you know, and we'll talk more about that at the next time. But as looming as all of this may sound, you know what? There's good news, not to worry, right? So there is good news, there's hope. And this is where I invite all of you here on the line to participate with me in this sort of game or competition here, if you want to put it. You know, as we're thinking about young adults, right? You got to think about, you know, fun, excitement, find ways to loop them in. So what I'll do is, you know, a lot of our young adults, they like to, some engage in Legos. Legos becoming a trend now. So what I'll do is I'll share with you sort of these Lego pieces that we've been able to put together, and it symbolizes a different point in time in the Bible, which is the good news, right? What we're hoping to deliver. And the first one who could identify what that is or answer the question that I raise in the chat box, all right? You get a point. And as we're all catechists and Catholic youth ministry leaders, this will be completely on an honor system. You keep track of how many points you earn. And we'll do this at the end of every presentation for the next 3. And the one with the highest point at the end, based on the honor code, you get a special prize. You send the address to Dan, and I'll ship Dan a very special, unique gift that I'll have for the winner. Okay. All right. So go ahead, get your fingers ready, and start typing in the chat box. Right. All right. So, you know, so we turn to the good news, right? And when we look at the good news, really the good news is God's love for mankind and his salvation of the world. So what's happening here in this picture? And I'll just be looking at the chat box to get the winner. Adam and Eve, all right? Catherine, point for you. Okay. All right. And, you know, the Garden of Eden, God put our ancestors there, and then something else happened. What happened here? Cain and Abel. Nick, you got it first. All right. All right. All right. You all can stop now. Nick already got it. Or maybe he just got fast fingers. All right. Cain and Abel. All right. The jealousy and the anger of mankind begin to sin, and God sees that. And then something happened. What happens here? Noah's Ark. Nick got it first. Point to Nick, right? And so in God's effort to punish the bad and save the good, God gave special instructions to Noah to build the ark, right? And then something here. What happened? Very Nick, it's on a roll. All right. All right. The Tower of Babel, right? You know, this is where they all sort of speak different languages and able to work on building the tower. And then venturing on. Oh, this is a hard one. What's happening there? How about what's the name of the character? Whoa, Nick, Joseph. All right. All right, the young Joseph, with the jealousy of all his brothers, thrown him down to the well. Very good. Very good. All right. And then who's in the basket? How about that? That's the question. Who's in the basket? Moses. That goes to Mark. All right, Mark. 1 point for you there. Mark by the Nile River there. And what's happening here? All right. 10 Commandments. Moses receiving the 10 Commandments. Nick, once again. I have to say, Nick, you are fast. All right, so God give the 10 Commandments to Moses there. All right, what's happening here? What's the name of the character there? Samson, very good. Is it Nick again? Nick. Oh my. All right, Nick, Samson. You know, his strength is from his hair. He cuts his hair, who loses strength, etc. All right, who is that? Goliath, very good. Mark, right, with the battle between David and Goliath, got that big rock that shot right there up in his head. Very good. All right, all right. Who are these? Three wise men. All right, Catherine got it first, right? And so, with all the effort, Christ, our Lord Jesus Himself, would have to be down and to journey with us and to die for our sins. And that's Him right there. I didn't know Jesus sort of kind of looked like that particular way from the Lego angle. All right, and then what's happening there? Baptism of Jesus. All right, we'll give it to Nick. I'm sure he meant Jesus. Just Jesus. All right, Nick, baptism of Jesus at the Jordan River, right? There we go. And the Holy Spirit is right there with Jesus as well. All right, what's happening here? Temptation of Jesus. Nick again. Very good. Temptation of Jesus in the desert. All right, and then getting closer to the end here. What's happening here? Loaves and fishes, and very good. God's miracle feeding. Whoa, Terry, 5,000. Just for that, we'll give you a bonus point. Okay, feeding 5,000. All right, very good. All right, and then for those who lack faith, what's happening there? Walk on water. Let's see if we can get a better answer. Peter loses. Peter walking on water. Peter sing. Anything? I was looking for something with Jesus and Peter, but someone type in quick, quick, quick. All right, so let's go with Peter loses faith. All right, let's give it to Mary. Right, there we go. Actually, no, Carrie had it first. There we go. This is where Peter sort of struggled with his faith, and Jesus was there. Very good. All right, what happened here? Lazarus. Very good, Nick. All right, revive Lazarus, and what happened here? Rise from the dead, Lazarus. All right. All right, temple. What about the temple? Money changer, overturning table, money changer. Cleansing of the temple. All right, let's go with that with Nick. There we go. So this is one of the few times that we see Jesus getting angry and going there and then flipping everything else. And my daughters would ask, hey, Jesus is so mean. And this is where I would have to explain to her, just as we would do with our young adults. Really, when we think of the temple, we think of the holy place for those we worship. And when someone violates that, just as if you have your bedroom, someone goes in there and just spray paint all of your bedroom, how would that make you feel? But then more so from a theological sense, this is where he says you can rebuild in 3 days, suggesting the heavenly kingdom. So awesome. Thank you for I think I mentioned who got the answers already, right? Cleansing the temple. Let's go to Nick. All right, there you go. What sacrament is this? All right, at the Last Supper. Very good. Where Jesus instituted the Eucharist. Beautiful. First was Nick again. All right. I think you all are being generous to Nick. I hope Nick is not bullying you offline to have you all not respond so he can respond. Washing of the feet. Mark. There we go. So Mark first. Point to Mark. Excellent. Very good. All right. Who is the person in the corner there? Judas, Tom. All right. That used to be a hard one, but all right. When he betrayed Jesus and the guards took Jesus away and he stood there. So Judas, Tom. Very good. All right. Easy enough. What's happening here? All right. Jesus carrying the cross. Nick. All right. What's happening here? Simon helped Jesus. Nick again on a roll. All right, how about this bonus question? Which number of the Station of the Cross is this? 5th. Nick. Is Nick a pastor or a priest? Fifth one. Very good. All right, there we go. And again, campus minister. Very good. So our youth were in good hands with you, Nick. All right, the crucifixion of Jesus on Calvary. Let's give it to Mark. And what's happening here? Thank you, Anne. Crucifixion of two thieves, taken down. Jesus from the cross. Anne, point to you. And then last but not least, all right, the ascension. Very good. Anne, point to Anne. Congratulations. All right. I don't have to keep track, but I think Nick is in the lead. But keep track of all your points, everyone, because the next one will have something else, and then the last presentation will have something else. So on the honor code. But yeah, despite all of these challenges that are going on, do know that there is good news, and the good news is through our faith. God does not abandon us. God does not give us a cross so heavy enough that we cannot lift. Because if that was really his intent, is to set us up for failure, to give us something that we cannot handle, then he is not the loving God that we all come to know. And I think the God that he bestowed upon, the cross he bestowed upon us, is to make us stronger as an individual, as a person. And so as we accompany with our young adults, first, let's understand what they go through. And then the next step, we'll talk about ways to accompany and ways to help them cope with the challenges that they face. And then ultimately, how to turn to faith as a compass direction to head towards Christ. Amen. All right, so I'll pause there real quick. Any questions? Any question pertaining to the topic discussed today?
Well, thank you, Young, so very much. Yes, amen, indeed. You were wonderful, very inspirational. I love the Legos. The biggest question I've gotten so far, I've gotten some text messages and things, is will you share all those awesome slides with the group?
You mean the Lego slides, right?
All the slides, Young. All the slides, Young.
Yes, I will share. I will give you all whatever it is that you need, and the Legos. And I'll share more at the next time.
Okay.
And before we go into Q&A, this is where, and again, as we're talking about accompanying with the youth, and hopefully we can put into practice now, the latest research that have shown that during time of COVID, when we interact with each other, especially in a small community where we have about 40 people on, just a mere fact of turning on your camera and having folks connect to one another face to face versus looking at a circle blot with a phone looking or just a name, it significantly improved not only morale, but also only sort of one's resilient. Because remember, as social being, we interact by connecting with each other. And if we're sort of in this business of being model to our youth, I think the more that we encourage one another to really have that camera screen on, granted you have appropriate background, not something that's, but have that on so that we can connect with one another. And so this is where I invite all of you who are online, if you're comfortable, I invite you to go ahead, turn on your camera so that we all can connect with one another as we have Q&A and questions and answers. Because really all of us were created in God's image. So regardless of how you look, wherever it is you're at, you are exceptionally beautiful in his eyes and beautiful in our eyes as well. I like to believe that. So I invite all of you to have your cameras on. All right, questions. I'll turn back to you, Dan, whatever questions that you may have.
Well, there's one question in the chat now, but I also, it's a dovetail off another one I received. The question in the chat from Terry was, why do you think anxiety seems to affect girls more than boys? But also in addition to that, just is there anything secondary, is there anything specific as we encounter young people who are showing some symptoms of anxiety? What can we do to help them feel more comfortable and more secure? So why the girls versus boys, and what can we do to help them feel comfortable?
Thank you. So the second question, I'm going to address that at the next presentation, right? Because the next one we're going to talk about ways to cope with it, how to help our young adults cope with that, and not to get our health to ourselves. But I'll talk about the questions today, and the first one is very relevant in terms of what may be that anxiety seems to affect more girls than boys, as we're talking about how it impacts. Me personally, and I'll tell you about the research. Historically, through the ages of time, society, and I blame a lot of this on society. I think our society tends to portray male with more masculinity, the provider. And if you go back to the ancient time where the cavemen where they would go out and hunt, whereas the female would be more so be the provider at home. And I think over time, the society socializes that. And even now, in days and age, when you look at sports, you look at media, it portrays the male as the more masculine figure versus the female more emotionally driven. And I think over time too, and then there are some biological nexus to that as well. But I suspect that because of that, female tend to sort of believe or feel that they're more touchy-feely related, which, again, I like to empower all to be the best that you can be. And that's very much true too with suicidality. While both male and female or boys and girls do have sort of a equivalent number of suicidal ideation, but it's sort of attempting and acting it out, carried it out, boys tend then to have more than girls. Because again, this macho sense is I can do it, and then they often would engage more in that. But that's sort of a little bit in terms of why it affects girls more than boys from a feeling sense.
So thank you. Nick just popped a question in about when to recognize the difference between a young person who's struggling versus a young person who needs professional help. And maybe I could just add on to that. What is the first move if you do feel a young person needs professional help?
Very good. Again, so two pieces to that. So how do you recognize when it's sort of quote unquote the norm coping with stress versus when they need professional help, and then how to refer them to professional help. The how to refer them to professional help, I'll save it later on for that's when we accompany with them, and part of the psychological spiritual first aid, a component of that is making referral, how to make referral, how to journey with our youth so that we can link them to services. But in terms of when to at least recognize when it's becoming more of a clinical concern that may elevate to more professional help. So everything that I've talked about, you notice that when you hear the word disorder, right? So you may hear symptoms of depression, you may hear symptoms of anxiety or generalized anxiety behaviors. When it rises to the level of a disorder, meaning generalized anxiety disorder, major depressive disorder, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia disorder, when disorder is put in, it suggests that whatever the symptoms that we're talking about has risen to the level that it impacts their ability to function, their ability to carry on their day-to-day as a son, as a daughter, their inability to just live life. And that's where it then rises a level of a disorder, and that's where I truly think that professional help is needed, right? But if it's just coping, going through with stress, which all of us experience, there's nobody on this line, all 37 of us here, and I even challenge you this: see if you can name me somebody that you know who have never experienced any form of stress, any kind of stress yourself. If you can't, let me know. We'll contact the World Guinness Record and make some money. But name for me someone who's never encountered stress. The last time I did it with someone, then they say, "Well, Jesus, he's God. God would have stress." Then we look at the Gospel of Matthew in the Garden of Gethsemane prior to his passion, knowing what's about to come. Whether he was sweating out blood. And science has documented that is a possible phenomenon when the anxiety or just anticipating what to come is so great. Right? And, you reach out to the Father, into your hand, let His will be done. So, so there isn't anybody that's immune to stress. And so those are sort of the regular stress that we deal with on a day-to-day basis. And that's where prevention, that's where our accompaniment can really help the youth. But once it rises to the level of clinical concern where it requires a specialized professional care, that's when we would make that referral. And at the next presentation, we'll talk about sort of, what's the best way to refer or to connect one of our youth members to services.
Thank you, Young. Stacy also shared that having a counseling contact ready for ready to go referral. And I do think if you have someone from your community that is a go-to, someone you trust, someone that the parish or the school is connected to have that card ready to say, I trust this person. I encourage you to see them, whatever. I think is also a great opportunity. So yeah, thanks.
I love the gumbo spirit where we're jumping ahead. That's excellent. So since you're talking about, I might as well just Catholic Charities. They do an excellent job, and I don't know if you have one there within your diocese, but they do an excellent job of connecting folks to a Catholic therapist, which is always good to have.
Thank you. I've had a couple of questions, Young, about the two different questions. I'll kind of put them together about the balance between isolation versus diving back into the community, and how the knee-jerk reaction to go too far one way or the other coming out of this pandemic time. And a follow-up to that, Terry mentioned about what kind of impact has the isolation maybe had on development overall.
So first question, help me, because maybe I'm not understanding the balance between isolation and diving back into the community so fast.
Yeah, the question came to me in the chat that it was that because we spend so much time in isolation, that there might be this knee-jerk reaction to go so far into being in community all the time that can actually be detrimental to development as well.
Definitely, and I would think, just as with anything in life, I think operating from a stage by stage, step by step process is always sort of the best way to go. Many of us, we didn't jump and run right away. We learned to crawl first, right? And then slowly crawl faster, and then slowly up in multiple falls, and then able to walk and run. Similarly, within sort of reintegrating back into a community with the pandemic, it ought to happen in stages and in steps again. Again, next presentation, when we talk about sort of accompanying how we sort of get folks back, that's what happens when you break it up into multiple presentations, right? You seem to get the question from the last. Tell me how. Yeah, so we'll talk about sort of the step in preparing, and very much what I've been doing with not only work here, but with the youth, is start talking about it, and not just automatically by tomorrow, all right, you all are back to church, you all are back to youth ministry, but we ought to be talking about it before, or even now. If you're not talking about it now, it's already too late to talk about what would it look like as we're returning back to normal ministry, or at least in person. Are we back one out of the month, and then 2 other month, in smaller number, and slowly increasing the number of folks who can be available. Preparation is always key. And then again, I don't want to jump ahead, but I think with the next one, we'll talk about sort of how to do so in steps, and how to really prepare. Just as, if I was to, put a bag over your head and kidnap you and bring you to Afghanistan, so I'm sorry, I deal with that here at work. Once I lift the bag, you'll be in a lot of shock. But if I was to tell you, you know what, 2 weeks from now, we're gonna put you on a plane. We're gonna fly you to Afghanistan. What Afghanistan looks like? Lots of desert. You'll be on a compound. And this is all that you'll be able to do. And you're gonna feel anxious. You're gonna feel stressed out. So I think by doing that, preparing beforehand does wonders in terms of getting our youth to understand what it means to be back. So I hope that helps. And I think there was another question.
Yeah, the second part of that question was the psychological development impact that this past year may have been having on adolescents.
Yeah, so we know from a mental health standpoint, and literature has shown this already, that it impacts our young adults significantly. Now, knock on wood that this is short term. I tend to believe that us as a community, we have strong resilience if we're able to come together and to support our youth. Now, the situation will get worse out of hand if our young adults have no support, family is not giving them any support, and when they get back to school, and school now expect them to function as though they were before. Think about a lot of schools now where the expectation is now you're back in person, you ought to be doing just as well that you were doing before, without factoring you just had a 4-year, I put it, trauma. 4-year worth of trauma that one's been dealing with. So yeah, it's going to have some impact. on our young adults. But that doesn't mean that it's going to be permanent. That'll be something that they'll have to struggle with their entire life. I think if we do put the prevention efforts in place, if we have the community support, if we have folks who are accompanying and journeying with our young adult, then the outcome is significantly higher. And maybe next time to remind me, we'll talk about self-care for the youth ministers as well as the youth. But I think a lot of times us as youth ministers, we don't do a good enough job of taking care of ourselves. We're quite comfortable in telling others to take care of themselves, right? But when it comes to our own self-care, there seems to be a challenge there. So maybe remind me if that's an area of interest that can shed some light in terms of how we can break through those walls, those barriers. Thank you, Jeannie, for commenting and for others on there. Okay. Other questions, Dan?
Yeah, so just in the interest of time as we're winding down, there are two more in the chat. So thank you for all your questions, but maybe we'll end on these two and then we'll pray together with a quick announcement. But please, I'm sure, Young, you're okay with, if questions come to us between now and the next session, please bring them with you. So there's two questions here. One, can you speak to the possibility of latent manifestations of stress as they may be triggered down the road?
All right, and I think some PTSD, I also saw that as well, like post-traumatic stress.
Yeah, the third one, Young, is can you say a word about grieving and helping young people and grieving the loss of this time? So it's a lot of that connected and future stuff. Again, you did a very good job, Young. You've led us all to where you want us to go the next time.
We're going to start group counseling together, all right? Everybody, all are invited. All are invited to come and join us one another. Okay, so let's talk about the latent manifestations of stress. So stress impacts all of us in one way or another. If it's unresolved, if it's untreated, just like any other disorders, and in particular PTS as well, it does manifest later on when triggered, right? So if our young adults are in their room, they're confined, and they're not finding that outlet, they're not finding a way to vent up to cope with what they're going through. And if unresolved, it's going to leave a mark. It's going to put them in a traumatized state. And when they are confronted with similar triggers or similar environmental cues later on down the road, again, if it's not treated or not resolved, that's going to trigger whether it be a visceral or emotional response to what they're going through. If it's just stress and they're not being traumatized in one way or another, whether it be domestic violence or whatever it is that's happening at home, for the most part, if we're able to re-engage our young adults, the prognosis or at least the outcome for resiliency is a lot higher. I would take a moment here to really encourage the group here to limit your use of PTSD as much as possible, because the D in there suggests it's a disorder, right? There certainly are PTS, post-traumatic stress, that all of us are dealing with. But when you slap that label on someone that's having PTSD, automatically you're saying, unless you're a provider, to say that you are now an individual with a disabling condition. And I don't think that's something we want our youth or our young community of folks to walk away with that impression. Certainly you may experience some post-traumatic stress. So go as far as PTS, leave the D out, and I think you'll be fine. Talk about post-traumatic stress or the stress from the trauma, the stress from the event, and refrain from using the word disorder. Okay. All right, grieving and helping young people grieve. Again, this is a question for the next time in terms of how we cope with grief and with loss. But capitalize on our young adult resilience. The inclinations of all of us of wanting to do good, altruism, all of that's within all of us. And that's the reason why many of us do charitable work. That's the reason why many of us are in this profession or in this vocation. It is because we're doing something good, and that helps us. And that's sort of the spiritual nourishment, fruits of the food of our soul, I believe, when you engage in charity, in altruistic work or to help others. So as they grieve the loss, which is a loss, one empathize, recognize and don't invalidate their feelings. This moment in time that they're going through is a loss. It's not just a loss of a loved one, a loss of an opportunity, a loss of graduation, a loss of a celebration. And these are the real experiences they go through. So invalidating it and saying, well, kid, man up. Look, I hear this from a lot of our adults. When I was your age, I didn't have a cell phone. When I was your age, your age and our age now, it's a whole different generation of age and time. And so what may be stressful for you is not stressful for our young adults. And to make that comparison, I just don't think it's unfair for our young adults. And the minute they hear you say that, guess what? You don't know me, you don't understand, I want to block you off, essentially, psychologically. And so, again, maybe if we're talking about accompanying, meaning journeying together, just as Jesus on the road to Emmaus or Emau in Vietnamese, he's there walking with the disciples, hearing their story, understanding their fear, their anxiety. And so similarly with our young adults, they own the story, they own the experience. They know what life is through COVID, through their lens. And if we want to understand it, we ought to have an open ears and listen. And next time we'll talk to how to effectively use that to help them and overcome the loss and reframe this. Because there's nothing that you can do. COVID is here, it has already happened. You can wish there's a magic wand, but unless Jesus is here and do so on his will, none of us can do anything about it.
Oh, wonderful, Young. Thank you so much for sharing so much insight. And again, I said it jokingly before, but you did such a beautiful job of laying the groundwork of information for us, leading us exactly to all those questions that we have, because those questions are very much what many of us are experiencing firsthand in our ministries and in our professions. So looking forward to building off of tonight next Monday. And just thank you so much for all of your insights today.